Welcome to episode 130 of the Fully In It podcast. I am Kate Saffel, your host, and I had the opportunity recently to sit down and chat with Rachel Marie Martin of the social media community Finding Joy. And her wisdom, stories, and encouragement were such a breath of fresh air. She is the author of the books Mom Enough and The Brave Art of Motherhood, and she's best known for encouraging moms and entrepreneurs to live each day with purpose and drive. She's also a dedicated mom to 7, and as I chatted with her more, I realized she is truly a woman who walks the talk in both motherhood and entrepreneurship. I hope you love hearing our conversation, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Welcome to Fully In It, a show for moms who are called to grow themselves while growing their families. Join me, Kate Saffel, a life and a business coach for moms, a homeschooling mama of 3, and a woman on a quest to show that our lives become even more meaningful when we remember why we are here and what truly matters most. This show is about going fully in it for you and the people you love by showing up powerfully in motherhood, entrepreneurship, in your home life, and for your family vision. Join me for weekly episodes that will inspire you to live intentionally and by your values, to slow down and truly be present to your family life, to make decisions that grow a profitable business without sacrificing anything in the process, and to become the kind of mom and woman you know you're meant to be in this lifetime. Well, Rachel, I am so thrilled to have you on the Fully In It podcast today and just to get to share your wisdom with my community. I know you have so many amazing things that you have created over your career, both motherhood and business. And I would love if you just, introduced yourself and told us a little bit of your story.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share and talk and have a conversation. So I am Rachel Marie Martin, and I always say it's the Marie because there's a Rachel Martin on NPR. So we each have our own lane. So that's the Marie. Otherwise, it feels like I'm a child again getting in trouble because my parents would always say Rachel Marie. But now I've grown into it. I'm the founder of Finding Joy. It's a website that's really about that, finding joy. And it was a motherhood journey too in that process. And I've written a couple books. I've written, my newest one is Mom Enough. But my story, it's a crazy story. Like I guess most people's stories are. I was married for 18 years, went through a really challenging divorce, all while I was in the online sphere of writing and all of that. So then started my own business, published a book, was just life just got crazy. I moved from Minneapolis to Nashville, and then I went from there, got remarried, and now I am a mom, my biological 7, bonus mom to 4, and mother-in-law to 1. So under the Christmas tree, there's 12 presents now, 12 groups. So it's busy.
I love it. I love it. And that just tells me that you have lots of motherhood experience, which I
do.
Cannot wait to dig in and hear more of this. I am curious though, what was the catalyst for you that took you from motherhood to building out this business around motherhood?
Oh, I love that question. For me, it was a twofold thing. In my first marriage, the finances were really, really, really dire. And for a long time, I spent so much time thinking if I was a better mom, if I was a better wife, if I was good at housekeeping, like all these things. And that part I thought was out of my control. I didn't step into that role. So there came a day when I knew that this couldn't keep going. I knew that it was either joy or bitterness. And I had this thought that you either choose joy or bitterness, but I realized that by not choosing joy, the default was bitterness. The default was that was going to be my story. And a lot of times when we don't make a decision, we basically get the default, what we probably don't want to happen. So I started writing, and this was in the early 2000s, back when there was Yahoo groups and all of that. And I was involved in Yahoo groups. And in the course of Yahoo groups came this thing called a blog. And everyone's like, well, you should write a blog. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I started writing, and I found that writing for me in the midst of motherhood was a way for me to get all those thoughts that jumble around inside out on paper or out onto the screen. And I've always been a creative. I've always loved computers. My dad got one in the early 80s where he taught me how to code. So the online world, I think, is this awesome space. And I started writing. And in that process of starting that blog and putting myself out there, I started to earn money. And what was surprising for me was it was the first time in my story for a long time where I realized, you know what, I can change my narrative, I can change my story. And in that process, I developed an ebook and just kept writing, kept figuring it out. When people would say the Facebook algorithm is dead, I would say, I'm going to figure out what to do instead. And that process allowed me to, I would say it was a lot of grit. That was the process of developing what used to be a Blogspot blog into what it is today.
Wow. There's so many different directions I could take this because
Okay.
it's just so fascinating to hear all of this and to hear your journey and how it just sounds like it naturally evolved, but also you had so much tenacity in moving with all the changes.
I love the word tenacity. I think tenacity is one of those words that I've taught my kids. And, if you're a homeschool mom too, it's like, oh, just let them know that tenacity, because it's like grit with vision. I think a lot of times we think of grit as like, I'm just going to do it and plow through it. But the tenacity, I think, is when you can see something that's beyond what's in your current perspective. And then you have that grit to keep going, because you will have naysayers. Like, I remember being on an airplane and they're like, oh, you blog. They would say this, like, and this big, but they didn't know. They just didn't understand it, or it was kitschy, or they didn't get it. And it was a lot of like being confident in what I do. And that, like, before we even hit record, that this was my career of what I was doing.
So when do you feel like people started to take you seriously?
It depends the person. I think that's what it was. When I would go to conferences where it was all creatives in the digital world, they took me seriously at that point. The moment I realized that what I was doing was something impactful or powerful was I was on a flight, and I was probably flying Minneapolis to Denver, I think. And I started having conversation with the person next to me. And we were talking, and he was asking me what I was doing and what I do. And I shared, and he was fascinated with everything that I was doing because I was an entrepreneur. And at the end, at one point I was like, well, the law of reciprocity, I have to ask what he does. And he said, oh, I'm just a civil engineer. And I was like, just a civil engineer? Like, that he qualified it to me. And I feel like at that moment, I realized being an entrepreneur and being this kind of in this space is a really powerful thing that a lot of people don't go that path. It's too risky. It's unknown. You're putting yourself out there. And that moment has stuck with me ever since. I wish I could find him and say, thank you so much.
Yes, right. And so it's those moments that help us see our path differently because we can see it from someone else's perspective.
Right, exactly. Because I think when we have our own perspective, we're like, we qualify it like we do for motherhood. Oh, it's just what a mom does. And I always challenge moms and anybody and entrepreneurs, don't put just in front of it. You're minimizing the impact you're having on the world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. So it's really how we communicate. And going back to something you said, you realized you could rewrite your narrative and tell a different story. I would love to hear more about that.
So I think a lot of times we're conditioned as kids or youth, especially me growing up in the 80s. I mean, here I'm dating myself, but it really was go to school, get good grades, participate, go to college, get married, do all this. There was like this checklist, this narrative that I thought I had to fulfill. And I was always a little bit of a creative. My dad will tell you that when I was a kid, I was like, we would go on these fantastic road trips, and my parents would say, he would give me my dad would give me a like a ledger and say, when we stop to get gas, could you just record the mileage and what we spent? This is before electronics. And he said, and I didn't even know this, he said I would write stories for every stop. He said I would just write all of it. So there was this creative, wild spirit that wanted to just do things. But I thought I had to follow the narrative. And when you don't ask why you're doing something, why am I doing this? Why do I do this all the time? You just kind of get stuck doing it and not even knowing why. It's like that story of, maybe you've heard it, about this woman that was making a ham and she cuts off the ends of the ham. And she asked her mom, like, why do I do that? And the mom's like, I don't know. I'm going to ask grandma. And she asked her mom, the mom asked her mom, and the grandma said, well, I don't know. I'm going to ask your grandma. She's still alive. And that she asked her generations back. And she says, oh, that's because my mom had a pan that was too small for the ham. And it just passed down. And at a certain point in my life, that bitterness, joy moment, I realized my narrative is being written for me, whether I agree with it or not. If I'm going to be passive and not do anything, if I'm going to say it is what it is, then I'm just agreeing that this is what the narrative is. And I believe we were created with all this tenacity and fire and vision. And I decided I'm going to about face and go another direction and really reclaim who I was created to be.
That's so, so good. So in that moment where you had that realization that you were in a state of bitterness and you intentionally decided to start choosing joy, what did that look like for you? Like, what was that process?
It was a lot of self-reflection. And I tell people all the time, like, changing your life, because we live in a world where you could change your life in 4 days and 3 easy steps. Changing things or changing your mind is never a one day. It's just not a one day thing. You
Right.
make the decision one day, you decide, I'm going to do it. But the next day you decide, and the next day you decide, and the next day. So for me, finding joy, that process was a lot of deciding to see the good in a life that was really complicated. But it was also kind of, and I didn't realize it until a couple of years later, the do one thing every day that scares you by Eleanor Roosevelt philosophy. And about 3 4 years ago, I was still living in Nashville. I was here and I was packing up my house because we were moving. And my one son looked at me and he said, Mom, you have two signs in the house that say almost the same thing. You have the do one thing every day that scares you by Eleanor Roosevelt. And then you have do one thing every day that makes you happy. And he said, why is that? And then I realized often the thing that scares you on the other side is happiness. And that's the process is, oh, I'm not going to do it. What will people think? Is deciding, you know what? I'm going to try. What's the worst that can happen? And can I survive the worst?
Yes, yes. And I see that so much in my community as well. I see moms who have big dreams and they're so afraid to step out in faith and take those steps. So
Right.
what additional encouragement would you give to a mom who has a dream or a vision on her heart?
Pay attention to it, really to pay attention to it. If that keeps coming up, it's there for a reason. It's something that's speaking, and you can try to push it down and you can try to say, wait, but then we're assuming that we have all the time in the world to do something. We're assuming that it's inevitable we'll live to be 70, 80, 90. And I don't want the regret of getting to be that age and thinking, I wish I had done this. I wish I had tried. Which is bitterness. I think that's where it comes in. It's this subtle creeping into our posture. So, and then find your people. If you're a mom that has this entrepreneurial vision, or you want to do something on Etsy, or you want to sing, there are people that are out there that have the same thing. And when you can find that community, they can bolster you. They can say, okay, that's awesome. And then I would say you're going to have naysayers. And like, if you didn't have naysayers, it would probably mean you're not being risky enough, or you're not stepping out, because often the naysayers are there. A lot of times, I think because when we change, we make them uncomfortable too, because then they're like, oh, what's happening over there? Do I need to do something? So that's where that little friction happens when somebody's life changes. Is it's not specifically sometimes even us, is we change the narrative for other people without even they're not even getting to choose it. All of a sudden their narrative is, oh, my friend is doing something different, and do I have to do something different?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, that's so, so good. So when you really started stepping out and doing things that scared you, what were some of the impacts that you began seeing on your relationships, your family, your life?
Well, one of the things is for my kids, I wanted them to see that I was happy as a person and I was fulfilled. And in the first book that I wrote something about, I knew my kids would think that I was a good mom, but I didn't want them to sit and talk to their friends and say, my mom was a really great mom, but she was not happy. And I thought that's not the legacy I want to leave for them. I don't want them to see me that way. I need them to see me doing hard things, because when I can do hard things, it gives them the courage to do hard things. And what's crazy about it is when you first do really hard things, especially for me, because I ended up making my life great crazy. I got out of a situation that wasn't healthy. I I worked really hard for years to make it look like it was healthy. So then all of a sudden everyone's like, what's happening? But I knew I needed to change things. And there's a ripple effect. There's pushback and all of that. But I remember about 4 years after that, or 5 years, my one daughter, Grace, wrote a paper in high school about hard things. And she gave the example of, I've seen my mom do the hard things, and she gave an example of when she pushed back to me, like I was mad at her, but I can see that her strength actually is inspiring me to do the hard things. And this is my daughter now, she's in the military and has done a lot of hard things. So I really, the impact is, it sometimes it will change relationships, and sometimes you'll lose relationships, and that's okay, because sometimes it's the untethering of yourself to something that's not healthy, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. And I think that's the part we forget is when you go after something, or when you change directions, or you pivot, or you decide, let's say I'm going to start running in the morning, something else has to give in order for you to do that. And it's messy when you're first starting to do that. And that, again, to use the phrase I've used a couple of times, it's okay that it's messy.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that this journey of becoming, it is imperfect, it's messy, but when you're pursuing that joy as well as your vision, that's when you overcome the hard things to create a life that you truly love and that fulfills.
Right. And, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean, I always tell people too, it doesn't mean you have to pack everything up and move to Italy and give everything up. It doesn't even mean that. It could be something like running a 5K. If you've never done it before, all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change something up. I'm going to do something that seems impossible. That's why that couch to 5K is so powerful, because it's assuming at the start you've never done it before. So the journey to self, it's a lot of letting go, and like almost forgiveness too for myself. Like, okay, like we're so hard on ourselves. Like I tried, and loving the story, loving the trying that happened before, and knowing you're gonna mess up. I love quotes, clearly, and my favorite one of all time is fall 7 times, stand up 8. And I love that, because the presupposition isn't fall once, stand up, keep going. The presupposition in it is you're going to fall. You're going to fall more than once. You're going to keep on falling, but you're going to stand up more than you fall. And there's so much grit, and, to use your word, tenacity, in that act of standing up again. Sometimes it means I'm going to change directions and do something different, or sometimes it means I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And we as humans get to decide what's the best next step.
Yes, yes. I love that so much. I often tell the moms in my community that you don't fail unless you give up, right? We just
Right,
keep going. We keep moving forward, even if, like you said, the path has to change, because that's
right.
part of the human experience. Now, there's something else that you've said a few times, and I would love to dig into this a little bit. And it's
Okay.
the concept of being good enough as a mom, or the ways that that perfectionist shows up. And I know you have your newest book, right,
Mm-hmm.
is out. And I would just love to hear a little bit about what all that means to you.
Well, to piggyback off what you said about moms is I've always said our track record for surviving the worst day ever is 100%. It's 100%. Like we want our kids to get 100%. We figure it out. And when you have an awesome day is to get your red Sharpie out and circle it on the calendar. Let yourself remember, because when you have that really bad day, you're like, I can't do this. And then if you can see, I had a great day, you can remember. My book, Mom Enough, they're letters that I've written over the last, since I started writing my website. They were letters that I would write to moms specifically. It started because one mom said to me, I love what you write, but I feel like I'm failing. And I was like, if she feels like she's failing and I feel like I'm failing, okay, I'm going to write her back like she's not failing. And so I wrote this letter back, and it was back in the early internet stages when on Blogger, there was a spot where you could just sign in, you could write a comment and it would be anonymous. So then I was like, it's anonymous. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to publish this, because if I'm feeling this way, there's chances are somebody else is. And I had that like nervousness right beforehand, that quickening. And my friend is like, you just need to hit submit. She's like, girl, hit submit. So I did, and it went viral. And at that moment, I realized what moms and women need to hear is this like acknowledgement of where you are. Like this, okay, you've had a bad day, or okay, you're overwhelmed, or okay, it's really hard to let go. But that in the end, like that encouragement at the end, like that idea of keep going, or the idea of seeing that you're enough in the moments that you might think don't really matter. You're like, you don't have to be perfect to make a difference, because if you go to an event where your child is singing, they are not looking around deciding like, who's the perfect mom in here. They're just looking for you. And when they see you, it's like they won $1 million at that moment. Like they're so happy. And when they're teenagers, they could be as quiet as could be, a little bit aloof, but the second they're sick, boy, they need you. And all of that goes away. And that's what motherhood is. It's, to me, it's those day-to-day moments that we dismiss, that before my grandmother died, she would talk about those simple things. And that's the mom enough moments.
Yeah. It's such a valuable reminder. I feel, especially in today's social media world, where it's so easy to measure yourself up against 10 different moms with different homes and lifestyles, and come to the assumption that you're not enough because you don't have that. So that brings me to my next question, which is, I think what's so neat about you is that you have this online experience. You were blogging in the early 2000s. And then, I remember social media kind of, in my experience of it, really started to become more prevalent in like the 2010s. Yep. So for you, how have you seen the way motherhood is communicated about, or even experienced shift from those earlier days to say like 2023?
It's a huge shift. It's crazy, actually. I mean, I love that I've gotten to see this experience. I mean, the Yahoo group phase of where all of a sudden moms were able to be friends with moms everywhere. Like I had friends all over the country and all over the world. But the mom experience, so I got Facebook, the page for my site, I think in 2011 or 2012, right when it first started. And my first post on Facebook, which I've always said, like, I couldn't have written a better first Facebook post but I didn't know it then, was I'm going to give this Facebook thing a try. And it's my whole heart in life is just this idea, like, what happens if you try? If you don't try, you don't know what could happen. And Facebook has been an unbelievable blessing to me. But I would say when I wrote that to the mom who feels like she's failing letter, a lot of people were shocked that I shared my messy sink. So this was written probably 2012. And I just shared like a normal sink, dishes in the sink that needed to be done, like normal kitchen. Because if you have children, you're going to have dishes. And people were like, how can you share that? That's so brave. I kept getting told I was brave. And I realized it's because in the early social media days, it was to me, it was really curated. It was like, there would be a mom, she'd have a white couch, a toddler, chocolate ice cream, no drips. I'm like, how is that possible? I've learned like to celebrate her, like, amen, you have a white couch and a toddler, you are my hero right now, and not to judge. That's been the primary thing I've learned is don't judge the other story. Like, this is their highlight. This maybe is the best moment. This is awesome. And when we have a great moment, we love our friends in the corner high-fiving us versus going, well, who does she think she is? But as social media progressed, I also saw it come in like almost the other side of the perfection, and where it was like there was a lot of like comparing and judging and all of that. And I decided this is not going to happen. So I declared my space online a sacred community. And it was about we are going to get along and we are going to encourage and respect the differences. Just because she does it doesn't mean that it's a requirement for you to do it. Like you were saying, you could see 12 different things online instantly and choose one. And then the second you choose one, the pop-up ad is going to be for the exact opposite of what you just chose. So it's a lot of being comfortable in your lane, knowing what it is, and having that core group of people that say, I love you for who you are, keep going. And that's critical, because the thing I've noticed the most is moms and women will write me saying, I feel so alone, but they have these huge networks of people and yet they feel alone. And my constant advice again is you have to find your people. You have to not accept everything as the truth. Is you get to pick and choose. You get to love that. You can decide, yes, I'm doing Elf on the Shelf, or no, I'm not. And either way, you're still a great mom.
Yes, so good. So coming back to your motherhood journey and doing that alongside entrepreneurship and being a creative, right? You were wearing all of these different hats.
Right.
What was that like for you truly to manage all of that?
Sometimes I look back and I think, how did I do that? It was a lot. It was busy. It meant giving up time for one thing to do something else. I remember writing at my old house in Minnesota at the top of the stairway by my two youngest boys' bedroom door, because at night they were in that phase of like, we're not going to stay in bed, and they kept coming out. So if I sat by the door, they would stay and eventually fall asleep, and I could get my writing done. So it was give and take. But I've also compared it. There are some times in life where you have to do the really hard stuff. And I talked about my grandfather, who was a farmer in southern Minnesota. And when it was harvest time, my grandpa was out on the field constantly. He was working. He wasn't in the barn. He wasn't shining things. He wasn't playing with me, but I always knew my grandpa loved me. Like I never doubted that my grandpa would love me. And there are seasons in life where we have to do the hard things like that. We have to say, you know what? No, I can't do that right now because I'm doing this because we know and believe that what we're doing right now will change tomorrow, will make things better. And I've really referred to it as the harvest time of life. And there are times in motherhood where that's what it is. It's the harvest. And my husband now, because I'm remarried, he'll remind me, because I'm in the process of writing another book, and he will use those words. He'll say, Rachel, harvest time, because I want to do everything else, or I feel guilty, like I can't go on that hike right now because I'm writing. And it's that perspective that helps too.
I love that analogy so much, right? Because we're planting the seeds, right? We're caring for our fields. We don't always see the evidence that anything's going to pop up out of the soil. And yet you are holding that truth that the harvest is coming and that's going to be your experience.
It is. And harvesting it's work. You know, like I said, my grandfather, we would go there and they would just come in to eat and go back out on the field. But if they didn't do it when the harvest was ripe, then they wouldn't be able to sustain it through the winter. So it was a great perspective for me. I didn't know it as a child that that's what I was witnessing, but looking back, boy, I knew he loved me, and his act of love was doing the hard thing when he needed to.
And what a beautiful example that you had that, right? That example of hard work at play and his reason for why he was doing it was so evident to you.
Right. And I also knew that come Thanksgiving, winter in Minnesota, you're not in the field. He would come and he would spend the night at my mom and dad's, and we would we would go downtown Minneapolis and we would go Christmas shopping. It was just such a magical thing. So I got to see both. Like those moments when he was there, man, it's giving me goosebumps. When he was there, I can remember his suitcase and I can remember him holding my hand. And he used to call me the city girl because I lived in Minneapolis as a child. And those moments were because he kept his life rightly ordered. He knew I have to do the work and then I can I have these moments with my grandkids.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, is there a moment where you felt that harvest experience with your family?
Yes, very clearly it was Kansas City Airport. I was leaving. I in the middle of the 2010s, that season, I did a lot of traveling and a lot of speaking because that's how I was able to grow my business. And as a mom that travels, that was an interesting thing because I would often get questioned about that. Well, who takes care of the kids? And I felt a tremendous amount of, I felt that guilt. That's when that harvest concept came up. And I can remember sitting in the airplane exhausted because I would do these trips so fast, get up as early as I could and do my speaking and get back. And as the plane was taking off, I was watching it leave and tears were in my eyes. And I remember thinking, I am doing what I'm doing because I love those kids. I love them so much, even in this tired. And that was the experience. And that to me was the harvest moment.
Wow. Yeah. So you knew, right? You knew because you could see that your efforts were creating what you desired for your family, even if you couldn't be with them in that moment.
Right. I could see the difference. In For years, I lived in real financial distress, and that's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. You spend your entire waking hours thinking about it, worrying about it, wondering about it. And I knew it was different. I knew it was different when I could just get what they needed, or I could go to the grocery store, or I didn't have to count the change when I was filling up my gas tank. And I could see that if I hadn't shifted it, that they were going to grow up with that being their story and their narrative. And I needed them to see that it was possible to change it.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. And I see right now so many moms are really stepping into their own businesses, their side hustles, their ways of creating
Right.
additional income to support their families, especially now. We've got a lot of inflation and everything going on. So, yeah, right.
Yes,
Grocery stores looking a little different these days.
it does. It does. But I will tell you, one of the things during COVID I did was I took a picture of it empty just so that I would remember to be grateful for it being full.
So smart of
Like, do you
you.
remember like
I
trying to get
do.
toilet paper?
Yes.
Like, I remember a man and I went to the grocery store next to me, and we got there early because the toilet paper was coming in when you could only get one thing, and there were two left. And he looked at me and he goes, at our 6 feet distance, of course, and he said, "One for you and one for me," and we left. And I just now I think every time I go to Kroger, it's full of toilet paper, and it's so easy to forget. It's just so easy to forget and take it for granted because when it's taken away from you, you're like, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? But
Yeah.
that to me is a powerful thing that we can do as moms and as just humans is to benchmark those things and to remember so that we don't get caught back up into the daily grind and forget like toilet paper is a real gift.
Yes. And gratitude is just such a simple and powerful game changer to remember the blessings of what we do have.
Right.
So, for a mom who is maybe just starting her own online endeavor, what encouragement would you give her? She is maybe in that boat you were in years ago where finances are tight. She's trying to figure out how to get her thing up and running. What would you say?
I would say do something you love, first of all. I've coached and taught hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs over the last 10 years. And one of the hardest things for me was when somebody would come in and they would have built something or a Facebook page and they had built it, but it wasn't congruent to who they were. They built it so fast that what the audience loved wasn't what they loved. And it just became drudgery. So really, really spend that time to wonder again. We teach our kids to wonder. I wonder what it would be like. And we shouldn't lose that wonder just because we're getting older. So you can wonder again, like, And when you wonder, you take the pressure off of needing to know. You can just wonder, I wonder what it would look like. And then to celebrate the small steps. You cannot, despite what's out there, I really, really believe it's tenacity and it's sticking with it. When I started my Facebook page again, it was 2011. So we're 12 years into it. And Kevin Hart, the comedian, one time he said something that has always stuck with me. He was playing Madison Square Gardens and he had just ended his act. And he came back out because there's all this applause and he was crying. And he said, I've waited for this moment for 18 years. And I thought, 18 years. He said, 18 years of playing back, little clubs here and there. And I think that's part of it is building a business is a lot of grit. It's a lot of vision and it's timing is you just never know. You never know what that moment is when it's going to click. But if you decide, it's taking too long or all of that, you might not ever get to that spot. And, I've told my kids for years, we know Thomas Edison because he didn't quit. He just kept going. If he had quit, it would be somebody else's name associated with all of that. And it's the same for us. So, have that vision, do what you love. And then going back to the first thing, find your people, find people that are willing to share. There's more than enough people out there for whatever vision you have, and you can do it. And there's people that are willing to say, hey, listen, this is how I did it. This is what works. And then once you figure out how it works best for you. So
I love this. Yeah. So love what you do, commit to what you're doing, and find your people that will support you along the way.
Yeah. You need people. We need them. Like friends matter. And somebody to say no, that's not working, and accept that. When I was in college, I studied architecture, which clearly not what I'm doing right now. But there was a part where there was this studio art time where we would put our stuff on the wall. I mean, everything. And there was a critique. And I learned very quickly that if I was defending what I was doing and not listening to the advice, then I could hear what they say and I could choose. Do I accept that as something that's I want to do, or do I not? But the people that were defensive and not willing to adapt, I could see it being this frustrating thing where they didn't grow. So be willing to adapt and pivot and learn and listen.
I truly hope everyone is listening. You have dropped so many gems this whole episode. I know I'm going to have to just listen to this a couple times to let it all soak in. Any final words, anything on your heart that you want to share?
Going back to the concept of enough, I would say to remember that. Don't put just in front of what you do, and remember that you're enough in your story and you're worthy. And being enough doesn't mean that you're I'm just not going to do anything today. Really, when you live that posture, it means that you look at who you're created to be and step into step into that with such vibrancy and joy and pride. I would say, would you say that to your kids? Would you say, you're no good at that. Why are you going to even do that? You would encourage them, try, figure it out. It's like that, I go back to the Miss Frizzle, try, take chances, make mistakes. And we don't have to live like we have it all figured out perfect all the time. We can still do that. And life becomes so much more vibrant and full of joy. Because again, going back to the do one thing every day that scared you and do one thing every day that makes you happy, more chances than not, more often than not, on the other side of what we feared is often something that's awesome.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So where can everyone find you? Tell us all of the things. Yes.
Okay. Well, most people find me nowadays on Facebook. So it's Finding Joy blog on Facebook. Just type it in. My face will pop up. There's the little blue verified check mark that I got years ago, which I was so proud about.
And now everyone has them, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was this big process. It was probably 2016 I got it. And I was like, yes, I'm real. I'm legit. Otherwise, findingjoy.net. And on Instagram, I'm at finding_joy. I've never changed that. And you can get my book, Mom Enough, at Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, of course, Amazon. So
yes. It's such a good read too. So highly recommend. It's one of those books that you can read a little bit each day, right? When you're just needing some encouragement.
That was the goal when I wrote it. Well, when the publisher said, let's put these in letters and do a book, because people had been asking for years, do you have this as a book? And the goal was not to read it all at once, because I read it all at once when I did the audible version of it, and it's a lot all at once. But if you can just pick it up, like I'm having an overwhelming day and I really want it to be the friend, like this is the friend that's telling you you can do this or you're not alone. And that was the goal. And I'm super, super proud of it.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for your time, your wisdom, and just all of this great encouragement and advice that you've given the women listening to this episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it a lot.